it's all kind of a mess. And I think that there are multiple reasons Apple should just surrender at this point. And I wanted to run this tweet by you. Matt Cowlin on Twitter, he tweeted, "Not sure I understand the hype around the Apple ruling. Taking your payments to your own website, you will without a doubt see more than a 15 to 30% drop in conversion rate." What do you think of that take for potential developers out there?
Well, it's interesting. By and large, that's probably true. I've argued this case for a long time for why
to me. Yeah.
for why Apple should back down and let it happen. Actually, my argument has always been Apple should put a fence around games. Then you can argue in court, we're just acting the same way Sony does, like Microsoft does, Steam does. 30% is standard for games. There's high risk for abuse. There's high risk there's lots of kids that play it. That's fine. And then they should have let productivity apps, bookstores, music services, and let them have a web view, a page in their app that lets them process purchases, and that's separate. That's been my take again for a decade. And when you came out in this case that games is so much of their revenue, it was such an obvious off ramp. And then, by the way, you have most of the ecosystem back on your side. Like, I love you, game developers. No one else cares. It's like, oh, sorry, the game developers aren't getting 100% of their magic gems, right? Like it just doesn't engender the sympathy that a Spotify does, where we're competing with Apple Music. This is unfair. Or an Amazon does. I want to buy a book and I have to go to the website. This is stupid. Or Netflix brings up the thing and they're like, yeah, call this number. Sorry, we know it's dumb. Like,
there are other ways. It's on you to find them. But yes. But
to this point, to the Netflix to the Spotify Netflix examples, I think are interesting. So number one, 15 to 30%. The 30% is a lot. Like, that's a lot of margin. Like, so the level of innovativeness and exploration to get a conversion rate good enough to there's a lot of room to experiment. Now, I tend to agree you're just going to convert better in app, particularly for the sort of purchases like in games where you're in the moment, you just want to get past the level, and kicking you out like almost makes it worse. And you're like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I spending my money on this? Right? Like, I think that's definitely the case. Number one. Number two, by virtue of Apple losing total control, one thing that's really interesting is they wanted to use this official link, like entitlement thing, where it was just a link. So you're kicked out to a website, and then you have to log into the website, and then you have to pay. And there's a lot of hoops. You have to like pick out what you want to buy because it's the same link for everyone. Now, because there's no restrictions, you can have what's called a tokenized link, where the link can have URL parameters attached to it, where it goes straight to a shopping cart with your 500 gems. You're already logged in. They know who you are. And it's actually pretty seamless. And this was a real, I think, mistake by Apple. I think they could have gotten away making security arguments by it needs to be a standardized link and blah, 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 blah. And then you're really killing the conversion rate by going for everything. They now lost total control, and the chances at getting a good conversion rate are much higher than they were if Apple had more control. Now, is it going to be as good? I don't think so, but I do like if you get the user logged in once, it's going to be a consistently good experience for every subsequent purchase. Number two, if you're a Netflix or a Spotify, this is the point I was getting at before, it's a one-time thing. And you're paying the margin to Apple forever. So it's not just 30 or 15% for subscription apps. It's not just 50% on one purchase. It's 50% every month for the rest of time.
Yeah.
So
totally.
actually, how much conversion can you give up just to have been able, whenever you do convert, you're not giving up margin, and you're not giving up margin for the whole lifetime of the customer. So actually that gap is significantly higher for subscription apps than they are for these one-time purchases. So I think Matt's point is more applicable to one-time purchases that are mostly about games. I think by Apple not giving in, they lost total control, such that if you just play Candy Crush all the time, log in once and you're going to get cheaper gems for the rest of time. Like, it is not going to be a terrible experience. And for entities like Netflix or Spotify, like, the payoff is, I think Matt's underrating the benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I raise it only to say that it's super plausible to me that if developers are forcing people to leave the app to complete transactions, there will be some level of drop off in conversions as there's
Absolutely.
more friction injected into the process. And I don't know whether it's the same neighborhood as 30% of overall sales, but that doesn't seem crazy to me. And so if Apple
No,
just
absolutely.
abides by this order, the optimal approach for most developers could end up being continuing to use in-app purchases as opposed to restricting that as much as they can and trying to force people to their external websites. Like, there's no guarantee that suddenly all the services revenue is going to go away as a result of this order.
Right. Well, and to the judge's general argument, Apple's easiest response to do this is to lower their rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such that that delta becomes even smaller. And again, something they could have done for years and years and years. And to the extent, and this is what I meant that I had that line about a price discovery mechanism. To the extent Apple does respond to this by lowering their rates, they are in many respects making the judge's point that they had a super competitive rate.
Indeed, yes. Well, and so the other question that I have for you in terms of what Apple might do next, because look, I do understand that Apple will want to appeal this ruling if for no other reason than to clean up some of the precedent around what happened here. But if they were to win on appeal and then try to reinstate the system that they just had, where you're charging developers a 27% fee for anything that happens on an external website
Right,
because you're
which they're
tracking
never
them
going
for
to do.
6 or 7
It's
days.
ridiculous.
Like,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. So, I mean, do they try to reinstate their policies? And I would guess no. But if they win, it just feels like it inevitably ends with regulation that comes for not just purchases that happen on external websites, but all in-app purchases. And Apple is hurt a lot more in that
Yep.
scenario.
This is why it's
Does
so
that
frustrating.
concern?
Like, absolutely. Like Apple needs to realize they have a lot to lose here. They can keep a lot of what they have, and when keeping a lot of what they have implies they're losing some, and that some they're losing is all bullshit. So it's like it should be fine, right? Like, no, that's exactly it. Like, again, my personal preference, which I think is very generous to Apple, carve out games. I think there's legitimate security arguments. There's legitimate kid arguments. And sorry, game developers, I'm just not that respectful of you arguing over
But has
margin on the
that
gems
ship
that you
already
sell.
has that ship already
Well,
sailed now
well, I'll get
in
to that.
the
I'll get
wake
to
of
that.
this? Okay.
I get to that. And then have web views for productivity apps and media services. Let them just sell it in the app and like effectively in the app. It's like a screen that you do, and then God, you threw me off. Just wait, where I was going. Oh, you have a web view, you have your own payment flow, you can control that sort of thing. You can go there, and then if you want the actual true native experience, that's genuinely pretty great. Apple owns that, and they have a right to own that because they built the platform. Like, that's their whole thing. That is a place that Apple should have been okay with. To your point, the problem now is, okay, number one, the game distinction is gone. Like, the whole app store is being treated as one. I think that's bad for Apple because I think the abuses with entities like Spotify are so egregious that
Apple's
all
abuses.
the arguments in favor of cordoning off games get ignored, and just the whole thing gets put in the same bucket. I think keeping stuff in the same bucket as Apple's tried to do has been a real mistake. So that's number one. And then number two, to your point, if they're forced to open up the in-app purchase flow so you can drop in your own payment processor or whatever it might be, now you don't even have the conversion problem because, like, I have a great conversion flow. You're just using Stripe instead of Apple. Like, that's not great either. I don't think that should happen. I think Apple probably can still preserve that, but it's not out of the question precisely because Apple keeps pushing it.
Yeah, exactly. If they keep pushing it and they're successful, there's no telling what would happen because I don't think this fight is just ever going to go away. It's not going to be like, all right, well, we won on appeal. I guess
and
the
if they
law
went
is
on
clear
appeal,
now.
I will be front and center saying I expected Apple to win. This is why my point all along is this is an egregious abuse that shows the limits of our antitrust, and therefore Congress needs to pass a law mandating ABCD.